You know what your problem is, Maya? You think throwing your money around makes you important, but deep down, you're still just a worthless burden who can't even keep a man. I stared at my phone screen, my father's voice, thick with cheap beer and a lifetime of casual cruelty, echoing from the video my uncle had accidentally sent me. The words, meant for a laughing, complicit audience in his sunny backyard, hit harder than any slap ever could. I was sitting on the lumpy, second-hand couch in my small apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, surrounded by the quiet, joyless evidence of my careful budgeting the generic brand groceries in the pantry, the curtains I'd sewn myself from a remnant of clearance fabric, the distinct lack of anything extravagant or beautiful. And yet, for the past 4 years, I had been paying my father's mortgage. Every single month, without fail, a significant portion of my life was funneled into his, a secret sacrifice he apparently saw as his due. My name is Maya, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a graphic designer for a small ethical marketing firm downtown. I make decent money, but nothing spectacular. I'd always been the responsible one, the quiet pillar of the family, the one who showed up when things got tough and never asked for anything in return. My father, Rick, had raised me and my older brother, Ethan, on his own after my mother passed away from a sudden aneurysm when I was 7. He'd worked his fingers to the bone in construction his entire life, and when he retired 5 years ago, his savings were, predictably, non-existent. The video had arrived at 9:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. My Uncle Ben, my father's younger, slightly softer brother, had meant to send it to someone else in the family, probably my brother. Instead, it landed in my messages with a simple text. Thought you'd want to see this from the cookout Sunday. I pressed play again, a masochistic need to confirm that my ears hadn't deceived me. The camera was shaky, clearly filmed on someone's phone at a family gathering I hadn't even known was happening. My father sat at the head of a long picnic table in his backyard, a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon in his hand, looking relaxed and comfortable. My brother Ethan was beside him, a self-satisfied smirk on his handsome face as he laughed at something someone had said. Aunt Patty, Uncle Ben, and a few cousins filled the other chairs, their plates piled high with barbecue. Maya's been real generous with that mortgage money. Uncle Ben's voice came from behind the camera, a little sycophantic. You raised a good daughter, Rick. My father snorted, a loud, dismissive sound that I knew all too well. Generous? She owes me. I put a roof over her head for 18 years. This is just her paying back the debt. Besides, she's got nothing else going on. No husband, no kids. Might as well make herself useful as our little cash cow. The table erupted in laughter. It wasn't mean-spirited, malicious laughter. It was worse. It was casual, affirming, as if he'd just told a well-worn, comfortable family joke. My brother Ethan, the golden child, leaned back in his chair and added, She's always been like that, desperate to prove she matters. It's kind of sad, honestly. My Aunt Patty, her mouth full of potato salad, chimed in, Well, at least she's good for something. Better than being completely useless, I suppose. I stopped the video. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. The apartment felt too small, the humid Charleston air too thick to breathe. The walls, painted a bland, landlord beige, were pressing in on me. I had been sending my father $2,000 every single month for 48 months. I did the math in my head, the numbers sharp and painful. $96,000. Nearly $100,000, wired from my bank account to a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM, a joke to be shared over pulled pork and cheap beer. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the casualness, the sheer, off-the-cuff cruelty of it all. They were sitting around a dinner table, eating food probably paid for with the money I saved by skipping lunches and buying day-old bread, laughing about how pathetic I was. And I hadn't even known they were gathering. Nobody had invited me. Nobody had thought to include me in these family cookouts where, apparently, I was the main source of entertainment. I looked around my apartment, at the couch I'd bought from a thrift store, its floral pattern faded and sad. I looked at the coffee table I'd assembled myself from an IKEA box, the curtains I'd sewn because spending $80 at Target felt like an impossible luxury. All because I'd been putting my father first, making sure his mortgage was paid, making sure he could keep the house he'd lived in for 30 years, the house my mother had loved, the only physical piece of her I had left. My phone buzzed. Another message from Uncle Ben. Sorry that wasn't meant for you. Let's just forget about it. Forget about it. As if I could unhear my own father calling me worthless. As if I could unsee my entire family. The the people who were supposed to love me, laughing at my expense. I sat there for a long time. The video paused on my father's smirking, contemptuous face. Part of me, the raw, wounded part that had been conditioned since childhood, wanted to call him immediately, to scream and cry and demand an explanation, to somehow make him understand how much he'd hurt me. But another part of me, the part that had learned to be quiet and careful and calculated from years of being overlooked, told me to wait. The next mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed, the sounds of the city outside my window a distant siren, the rumble of a late-night bus fading into a dull hum as I replayed the video over and over in the darkness. I memorized every word, every laugh, every contemptuous look. By the time the sun began to cast a pale gray light into my room, I'd watched it 17 times. My relationship with my father had never been warm. After my mother died, a sudden, shocking aneurysm that had stolen the light from our home, he'd thrown himself into work. He was a ghost in our lives, leaving before we woke up, returning long after dark, smelling of sawdust and exhaustion. He left Ethan and me to fend for ourselves most of the time. Ethan, being 3 years older, had taken on a protective role that quickly morphed into something else entirely. He became the golden child, the athletic, popular son who could do no wrong, while I became the quiet, artsy girl who was always in the way, a constant, somber reminder of the wife he had lost. I remembered being 10 years old, so proud of a watercolor painting I'd done at school of the marsh at sunset. I'd run to show it to my father the moment he got home from a construction site, his boots caked in mud. He'd barely glanced at it, his eyes fixed on the television. "That's nice, Maya. Go play outside. I'm trying to watch the game." Ethan had laughed from the couch. "Nobody cares about your stupid paintings, weirdo." That became the pattern. Ethan would belittle me, and my father would either ignore it or join in with a tired sigh, as if my very existence was an inconvenience. When I made the honor roll all through high school, my father's only comment was, "Good, at least you're not completely useless." When Ethan barely graduated, my father threw him a massive backyard party with a keg and bought him a used pickup truck. I'd left for college at Clemson on a partial scholarship, working 2 jobs, one in the campus library, one waiting tables at a greasy diner to cover the rest. My father never offered a dime. "You're the smart one," he'd said, a statement that was meant to sound like a compliment but felt like an abdication of responsibility. "You'll figure it out." I did figure it out. I graduated with a degree in graphic design and landed a decent job in Portland before moving back to Charleston a few years later to be closer to, well, I'm not sure what, to a family that never quite felt like mine. But I still called every week. I still sent birthday cards with carefully chosen words. I still showed up for Christmas, even though I often felt as decorative and ignored as an ornament at the back of the tree. 4 years ago, my father had called me. It was unusual. He never called unless he needed something. His voice was gruff, tinged with a slight, uncharacteristic embarrassment. "Maya, I need to talk to you about something." He explained that his meager retirement wasn't covering his expenses. The mortgage on his house was eating up most of his monthly income, and he was starting to fall behind. The bank had sent warnings. He might lose the house. "I can't ask Ethan," he'd said, and the words had felt like a small, precious gift. "He's got his own family to worry about now. His wife Jessica just had the baby, and money's tight." I'd felt a flutter of something in my chest. Not quite hope, but close to it. He was choosing me. He was coming to me for help. He needed me. "How much is the mortgage?" I'd asked, my voice steady. $2,000 a month. It was a substantial chunk of my income, nearly half of my take-home pay at the time. But I could manage it. I'd have to cut back on everything, live more frugally, put my own dream of saving for a down payment on a condo on hold indefinitely. But I could do it. "I'll help, Dad," I'd said, the words coming out before I had a chance to second-guess them. "I'll send the money every month." There had been a pause then. "Really? You'd do that?" "You're my father. Of course I'd do that." "Well, thanks, Maya. I appreciate it. That was 4 years ago. Since then, I'd faithfully sent $2,000 on the first of every month via Zelle. My father rarely thanked me. Sometimes he'd acknowledge the transfer with a brief text, "Got it." Other times, nothing at all. I'd convinced myself it didn't matter. I was helping. I was being a good daughter. This was my penance for not being the child he'd wanted. Maybe, after all this, he would finally see my worth. Now, sitting in my quiet apartment with the ghost of that video playing on a loop in my mind, I realized how breathtakingly foolish I'd been. He didn't see my worth. He saw a convenient source of money, a cash cow, a worthless burden who was at least good for something. I pulled up my banking app and scrolled through the transfer history, month after month, like clockwork. $2,000, $2,000, $2,000. I did the math. $96,000. I thought about what I could have done with that money. I could have a beautiful apartment in a safer neighborhood. I could have a reliable car that didn't make a strange rattling noise every time I hit a pothole. I could have traveled. I could have saved for a house of my own, invested in my future. Instead, I'd poured it all into a house I'd never inherit, for a man who mocked me behind my back to the entire family. My phone rang. It was my father. I stared at the screen, watching his name flash. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. 20 minutes later, Ethan called. I ignored that too. Then a text from my father appeared. Ben told me about the video. It was just family joking around, Maya. Don't be so sensitive. Don't be so sensitive. The classic gaslighter's defense. As if the problem was my reaction, not his words. I thought about responding. I thought about calling him and unleashing 4 years of pent-up hurt and anger. But something stopped me. A small voice in my head, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time, cold and calculating, whispered, "Wait, think, plan." I opened my laptop and started digging through my digital records. Every Zelle transfer confirmation, every email, every brief, transactional text exchange about the mortgage. I saved everything to a secure folder on my desktop, labeling it simply, Receipts. AITA. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called the mortgage company. "Hello. I'm calling about the account for Rick Henderson," I said, using my father's name. I explained that I was his daughter and had been making payments on his behalf. I just wanted to confirm the current account status. The representative on the other end was surprisingly helpful. The account was in good standing. All payments had been received on time. In fact, she added cheerfully, according to our records, the mortgage will be paid off completely in just 6 more months. 6 months. After 4 years of my payments, my father was only 6 months away from owning his house outright. A house worth close to $500,000 in the current Charleston market. And then what? Would he have even told me? Or would he have just let me keep sending the money, pocketing an extra $2,000 a month for himself? The cold, sickening certainty of the answer settled in my stomach. I thanked the representative and hung up. My hands were steady now. The hurt was still there, a deep, radiating ache in my chest. But on the surface, I felt something else, something sharper, something that tasted like righteous determination. The next payment was due in 12 days. He was expecting it. He was counting on it. The following days passed in a strange, surreal fog. I went to work. I designed logos. I responded to emails. I sat in on meetings. On the surface, everything was normal. Inside, I was building a war machine. My father called twice more. I didn't answer. Ethan sent several texts, each one more annoyed than the last. "Dad says you're ignoring him. What's your problem?" Then, "You're really going to throw a fit over a stupid joke? Grow up." And finally, "You're being childish, Maya." I didn't respond to any of them. On Thursday, my best friend Chloe called. We'd been inseparable in college and had stayed close. She was one of the few people who knew the full, unvarnished story of my family dynamics. "You okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "You've been quiet." I told her everything. I texted her the video. There was a long, heavy silence after she watched it. "Leah," she finally said, her voice tight with a rage I knew was on my behalf. "That's monstrous. Those people are horrible." "I know. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to stop paying the mortgage." "Good. You should have stopped years ago. You should have never started." "But I'm not just going to stop quietly," I continued, the plan solidifying as I spoke the words aloud. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what's been happening. The whole story." Chloe was quiet for a moment. "How?" I explained my plan. The mortgage receipts, the video, the documentation of every single payment. I was going to package it all together and send it to every member of my extended family, to my father's friends from his old construction crew, to the neighbors he'd known for decades, to the deacons at the church he attended every Sunday. I wanted them to see the truth. Not the version my father told at his self-pitying Sunday cookouts, but the actual documented facts. He's going to be furious, Chloe warned, like explosively furious. Good. Maya, I'm serious. He might try to retaliate. Your whole family might turn on you. They already have, I said quietly. They've been turning on me my whole life. I just didn't realize it until I saw it on video. She sighed. Okay, if you're sure about this, I'm behind you 100%. What do you need from me? Just be there when the fallout happens. I'm going to need someone to talk to. Always. After we hung up, I spent the evening compiling everything into a single damning narrative. I pulled up every bank statement showing the transfers. I downloaded every confirmation email. I took screenshots of the terse text conversations with my father about the payments. I organized it all chronologically in a PDF, creating a clear, undeniable timeline that showed exactly how much I'd given and for how long. Then I uploaded the video my uncle had sent to a private link. I drafted an email. It took several attempts to get the tone right. I didn't want to sound hysterical or emotional. I wanted to sound calm, factual, and irrefutable. The email read, Subject: an important clarification regarding my father, Rick Henderson. To my family and friends of the family, I am writing to share some information regarding the mortgage payments I have been making on my father's behalf for the past 4 years. As he has presented his financial situation to many of you, I thought it was important for everyone to understand the full context. Attached, you will find a PDF containing documentation of every payment I have made, totaling $96,000. Here is a link to a short video from a recent family gathering that I believe provides helpful insight into the situation. Effective immediately, I will no longer be making any future payments. Sincerely, Maya. Simple, direct, devastating. I created a mailing list. Uncle Ben, Aunt Patty, my cousins, my father's friends from church, the neighbors he'd known for decades, anyone who might have heard his version of events, anyone who might have sat at those Sunday dinners and laughed along. But I didn't send it yet. The mortgage payment wasn't due until Monday. I wanted to wait until the last possible moment, until my father realized the money wasn't coming, until he started to panic. Then, when he called, demanding to know where his payment was, I'd hit send. The weekend was torture. I kept checking my phone, half expecting my father to somehow sense what I was planning. But there was nothing. Radio silence from the entire family. On Sunday evening, I went for a long walk through my neighborhood. Charleston was beautiful in early autumn, the leaves just starting to turn, the air crisp and cool. I thought about my mother. I wondered what she would think of what I was about to do. I decided she'd understand. She'd spent her life trying to make my father happy, trying to smooth over his rough edges. It had exhausted her. Maybe, in some way, she'd want me to stop making the same mistake. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The email was still there, waiting in my drafts folder. At 8 p.m., my phone rang. My father. I answered this time. About time, he said, his voice gruff. You've been avoiding my calls all week. I've been busy. Too busy for your own father? I almost laughed at the irony. What do you need, Dad? Just checking in, making sure the payment's going through tomorrow. You know, the mortgage is due. There it was. Not, how are you? Or, I'm sorry about the video. Just a confirmation that his cash cow was still functioning properly. Actually, I said slowly, savoring the moment, I wanted to talk to you about that. What about it? I'm not sending the payment this month. Silence. Then, what? I'm not sending the payment, I repeated, my voice clear and steady. I'm done. Done? What the hell does that mean, done? It means exactly what it sounds like. I've been paying your mortgage for 4 years, $96,000, and I'm not doing it anymore. His voice turned sharp, angry. Maya, this isn't funny. That payment needs to go through tomorrow. Then you'll have to make it yourself. You can't just stop. We had an agreement. End of 24. We had an agreement where I sent you money, and you called me a worthless burden behind my back. That agreement is terminated. Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, defensive. Ben shouldn't have sent you that video. But he did. And now I know exactly what you and the rest of them think of me. It was just talk, family stuff. You're overreacting. Family stuff? You called me your cash cow. You said I was worthless. You let everyone laugh about it. Look, I didn't mean it like that. You're twisting things. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. I'm not twisting anything. I heard what you said. I saw how you said it. And now I'm making a choice. I'm done being your cash cow. Maya, be reasonable. Where am I supposed to get $2,000 by tomorrow? I don't know, I said. And I don't care. That's your problem now. You're being selfish. And there it was. The accusation I'd been waiting for my entire life. Selfish. Because wanting basic respect from my own father was selfish. Because stopping myself from being used was selfish. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from hurt. It was from adrenaline, from the knowledge that I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. My phone immediately started ringing again. My father, then Ethan, then my father again. I turned off the ringer and set the phone face down on the table. Then I opened my email, pulled up the draft I'd prepared, and hovered my cursor over the send button. I thought about that video one more time, my father's smirking face, the laughter around the table, the casual cruelty of people who'd never once considered how their words might hurt me. I clicked send. The emails went out at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. I'd set them to send automatically, timed perfectly for when people would be checking their phones over their first cup of coffee, when they'd have the quiet time to read through everything, when the information would have maximum, devastating impact. I didn't sleep Sunday night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, imagining the chain reaction I had just set in motion. I pictured Uncle Ben opening his email and seeing the video he'd accidentally sent me, now weaponized and broadcast to the entire family. I pictured Aunt Patty reading through the mortgage receipts, the numbers adding up, her casual cruelty now framed by the stark reality of my sacrifice. I pictured my father's friends from church watching him call me worthless, hearing him laugh about using me as a cash cow. At 6:15 a.m., my phone, which I had placed on the other side of the room, began its assault. I'd turned the ringer back on, and now I watched as the screen lit up with notification after notification. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails, the digital equivalent of a bomb going off. I made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. I ate slowly, methodically, while my phone continued its frantic dance across the counter. I wasn't ready to engage yet. I wanted them to sit with it. I wanted them to talk to each other, to compare notes, to really absorb what they'd seen and read. At 7 a.m., I finally picked up the phone. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, 21 voicemails. I started with the texts, a digital firing squad. Uncle Ben. Maya, I am so sorry. I had no idea Rick felt that way. Please call me. Aunt Patty. This is humiliating for everyone. Why would you air our private family business like this? This is not how we handle things. Ethan. What the hell is wrong with you? You're destroying this family over a stupid joke. My father. Multiple messages. Each one angrier and more typo-ridden than the last. How dare you, you vindictive little bee. After everything I did for you. You're dead to me. But then there were other messages, ones I hadn't expected. My cousin Sarah, Ben's daughter. I had no idea you were paying his mortgage. I'm so sorry, Maya. What he said about you was disgusting. I'm on your side. My father's neighbor of 20 years, Mrs. Gable. I always thought you were such a sweet girl. Your father never mentioned any of this. I'm appalled by what I saw in that video. And then one that made me pause, my fork halfway to my mouth. It was from a woman at my father's church. Frank has been accepting donations from the congregation for years, claiming he was struggling financially. Were you paying his bills this whole time? Donations from the church, while I was sending him $2,000 a month. A new, darker layer of his deception was revealed. I opened the voicemails. My father's voice filled my apartment, raw with rage. You think you can humiliate me like this? You think you can turn everyone against me? You're nothing, Maya. You've always been nothing. Your mother would be ashamed of you. I deleted it. Ethan's was equally furious. You've always been jealous of what Dad and I have. This is just you trying to ruin everything because you can't stand that you're alone and miserable. Grow up. But then Uncle Ben's voice, quieter, almost broken. Maya, it's me. I owe you an apology. A real one. I should have said something that night. I should have stood up for you. What Rick said was wrong, and I was wrong to sit there and laugh. I was a coward. I'm so sorry. I sat with that for a moment. An actual apology. It didn't fix anything, but it was a crack of light in the darkness. I decided to check social media. That was a mistake. My father had posted on Facebook. When your own child betrays you and spreads lies to destroy your reputation, you realize you raised a monster. I gave Maya everything, and this is how she repays me, praying for guidance. The comments were a battlefield. Half were supportive of him, from people who didn't know the full story, saying things like, family should stick together, and kids these days have no respect. But the other half had clearly received my email. One comment read, "Frank, I saw the video. Those weren't lies. You called your daughter a cash cow while she was paying your bills. How is she the monster?" Another, "I can't believe you accepted money from the church while your daughter was supporting you." And the ripple effect was spreading faster and wider than I'd imagined. My work phone rang. My boss, Amanda. I'd completely forgotten about work. "Maya, are you okay? You're usually here by now." I looked at the clock. 8:30 a.m. "I'm so sorry. I had a family emergency. Can I work from home today?" "Of course," she said, her voice kind. "Is everything all right?" "It will be," I said. "Thank you for understanding." I spent the rest of the morning fielding messages. Around noon, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Maya Henderson?" A woman's voice asked, professional and crisp. "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Catherine. I'm the treasurer at Grace Community Church, where your father is a member. I'm calling about some financial discrepancies we've discovered." My stomach dropped. "What kind of discrepancies?" "For the past 3 years, your father has been receiving monthly assistance from our church's hardship fund. He claimed he had no family support and was at risk of becoming homeless. Based on the documentation you sent to several of our members this morning, it appears those claims were false. 3 years of assistance, while I was sending him $2,000 every single month." "How much?" I asked quietly. "I'm not at liberty to discuss exact amounts, but it's significant. The church board is meeting this afternoon to discuss the matter. I thought you should know." After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence. It wasn't enough that he'd used me. He'd also scammed his own church, taking money from genuinely needy people. By evening, the situation had escalated further. The church had apparently made an announcement during their evening service about the misappropriation of funds. They hadn't named my father directly, but everyone knew. At 9 p.m., there was a frantic, heavy knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw Ethan standing there, his face red with rage. I didn't open it. "Maya, I know you're in there," he shouted, his voice muffled through the door. "Open up. You've ruined everything. Dad might lose the house because of you." "He might lose the house because he can't pay his own mortgage," I shouted back. "That's not my problem." "You selfish B. After everything Dad did for us." "What did he do, Ethan?" I screamed, my voice cracking. "What exactly did he do besides provide the bare minimum while making me feel worthless my entire life?" There was a moment of silence, then the sickening thud of him kicking my door. "This isn't over, Maya." I heard his footsteps retreat down the hallway. Shaking, I called building security and reported the incident. The next morning brought a development I hadn't anticipated. A call from a lawyer. "Miss Henderson, my name is Robert Barnes. I represent your father, Rick Henderson. He's asked me to contact you regarding the defamatory materials you distributed yesterday." I almost laughed. Everything I sent was true. I have documentation. "Regardless," the lawyer said, his voice slick and unbothered, "you have caused significant damage to your father's reputation and emotional well-being. He is prepared to pursue legal action unless you issue a public retraction and apology. Tell my father," I said, my voice cold as ice, "that I will see him in court." The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, more angry voicemails, and surprising messages of support. My cousin Sarah organized a small fund among the younger relatives to help me with legal fees. The woman from my father's church called back to say several members had started a collection to repay me for the mortgage payments I'd made, horrified that I had been supporting him while he was taking from them. The lawsuit threat was a bluff. Faced with the threat of a countersuit and having his church fraud exposed in a legal deposition, my father dropped it. Without my money, the foreclosure process began. The church, meanwhile, moved forward with its own legal action to recoup the tens of thousands of dollars he had taken from their hardship fund. 3 months after I clicked send, the house was sold at a foreclosure auction. The beautiful home my mother had so lovingly decorated was gone, another casualty of my father's choices. Uncle Ben called to tell me that Rick had moved into a rundown trailer park on the outskirts of town. Ethan, furious and embarrassed by the public scandal, and the loss of his own financial supplement from our dad cut off all contact. My father was, for the first time in his life, completely and utterly alone. A year has passed. My life is quiet now, and for the first time, it feels like my own. I got a promotion at work. I'm saving money, building a future. I travel. I'm taking a pottery class. Small joys I never allowed myself before. The blog I started, The Uninvited Daughter, has found a small but loyal following of people navigating their own toxic family dynamics. Sometimes revenge isn't a fiery explosion. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady act of building a life so full and peaceful that the people who hurt you no longer have a place in it. I don't know if my father ever felt remorse. I don't know if Ethan ever understood the depth of the damage. But I know that I am free. I told the truth, not to destroy them, but to save myself. And in doing so, I finally found a home that no one can ever take away from me, a life built on my own terms.